school respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in South Dakota. This is sportsmanship. School sports, it's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
Who do I perform for? I perform for all the awesome composers whose music deserves to be heard.
I perform for all the stagehands who make sure I never miss a cue.
I perform for our high school choir director who taught me to breathe from the diaphragm and sing from the heart.
Speech, debate, theater, music. The performing arts teach valuable life lessons that typically aren't taught in the classroom. They help high school students learn leadership skills that prepare them to enjoy more satisfying, productive lives.
I perform for Mrs. Evans, my high school debate coach, who has helped me become more confident than I ever dreamed possible.
This message presented by South Dakota High School Activities and the high school in your community.
Hey, I've got a question for you. Who will you perform for?
The South Dakota High School Activities Association Board of Directors meeting is currently in recess or executive session. Please stand by for continued live audio coverage.
This may sound like a typical high school basketball game being played on a Friday night in South Dakota. In fact, it's a crash course in cooperation and teamwork. It's a test of dedication, determination, and drive. It's character development in action. If you think high school sports are only about competition, think about this. High school sports can play a critical role in a student's overall education. In fact, studies show that students who participate in school sports are more likely to enjoy greater levels of achievement in their academic lives. At the same time, playing sports helps teach lessons not covered in the classroom. Lessons like tolerance, respect for the rules, and the importance of supporting your community. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association. There's just one place where students are students first, and athletics are played with purpose and perspective. That place is your local high school. High school sports offer more than the joy of competition. Studies show that student athletes in South Dakota are also likely to enjoy greater levels of achievement in other areas of their lives, including academics. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
Everybody knows that high school sports generate suspense, excitement, and drama.
They also generate higher grade point averages, stronger work habits, and greater self-esteem.
Everybody knows that high school sports give us more value for our entertainment dollar.
They also give us leaders committed to strengthening communities right here in South Dakota. The true value of playing sports in school can't be measured in wins and losses or dollars and cents. Studies show that participation in sports, along with other extracurricular activities, is one of the best ways to teach leadership, cooperation, accountability, and other invaluable life skills. Don't just stand on the sidelines. Encourage the young people you know to get in the game. When you do, you'll be helping them get ahead in life. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
The South Dakota High School Activities Association Board of Directors meeting is currently in recess or executive session. Please stand by for continued live audio coverage.
These days, the concept of value matters more than ever. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a better value than high school sports. Extracurricular activities, including sports, make up about 2% of the budget for a typical South Dakota high school. In return, participation in sports promote citizenship and sportsmanship. Sports also instill a sense of community pride and teach lifelong lessons about cooperation and self-discipline. They encourage physical fitness. They produce community leaders. By offering so many benefits to the community for such a small percentage of a school's overall budget, it's easy to see why high school sports are one of the best bargains around. The real cost would come from not having them at all. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
What do basketball, choir, drama club, and marching band all have in common? They're all high school activities that offer learning opportunities not necessarily found in the classroom. They take up just a fraction of a typical South Dakota high school's budget, and they go a long way to giving young people the tools they need to thrive. High school activities, they're more than extracurricular. They're extra important, too. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
It may not require a textbook, but it's filled with valuable lessons. It may not take place in a classroom, but it's an ideal environment for learning. It may not involve a diploma, but it can help prepare South Dakota's young people for life. It's high school sports. High school sports can play a critical role in a student's overall education. In fact, studies show that students that participate in high school sports are more likely to enjoy greater levels of achievement in their academic lives. If you think high school sports are only about competition, think again. Better yet, think about attending a high school sporting event in your community.
Right. Go.
Okay, welcome to everybody that's in on Zoom and any guests here today. We're going to call the meeting to order. This is the August meeting of the South Dakota High School Activity Association Board of Directors. And at this time, we're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, looking around the room, all board members present except Dan Aker of Winter, who is out on a family situation. At this time, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion.
A motion by Jerry.
Second.
And second by Tom Culver. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? That motion carries. Item number 2, approve the runoff election results. And want to congratulate Tom Culver on winning that runoff and joining us, and look forward to working with Tom. So look for a motion to approve those election results.
So moved.
So moved by Soma, second by Murphy. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Congratulations, Tom. Okay, item number 3 is public forum. If there is anybody, I see we don't have any guests in person. Anybody on Zoom that is indicated?
This is Mr. Kelly's athletic director who was currently muted, so I think we're good to go.
Morning, Jordan.
Pretty early for him.
I didn't catch that, John. I didn't. Yes, here, so, all right, we'll go on to the minutes of the regular meeting held on June 11th and the special meeting held on July 22nd of this year. So I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes of those 2 meetings.
So moved by Murphy.
And second by Weisman. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, that motion carried. Financial reports.
Yeah, so our income statement first, and these profit and loss sheets. Big thing of note right up top is our sponsorship revenue, which was added to accounts receivable on July 1st. There's the televised state champions, which is South Dakota Public Broadcasting, ball bids with Baden. Our 4 corporate programs, Sanford, Dakota Bank, Farmers Union, and South Dakota Army National Guard. Alliance Highway Safety, and then Fine Designs, our merchandise partner, which is new this year.
Those are all invoiced, or they're all noted as received at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily invoice them all. They get paid throughout the year.
In June, there was the collections of the sub-state events. Obviously, state tournaments didn't happen, but some of the sub-states still did, and collected from those. Participation fees came in June. There in that 2730. And our fee revenue of note, the $58,154.31 registration of officials. That includes our PayPal account being added, which was a total of $54,147.31. And then that continued with more payments into July.
Just like we had on that last audit, where sometimes those overlap, this would include some registrations for last year. It includes some registrations for the current year coming up. But we did extend our date for official registration.
Next, under the general revenue, or on non-operating income revenue, we had a contribution to donations. That's that $31,000 is technically a donation from Billion Auto to debit our depreciation of our company cars. So those depreciate at the end of the year, and that depreciation is accounted as a donation from Billion.
Implied value of their donation to us.
Going into expenses, there's regular salaries and all our employee benefits. In our purchase services, the largest one there, this July, $24,560.25, paying our 1819 audit. And then in the staff travel, the large number there is the other side of that Billion Auto implied value of the car donation. There are rule books. A lot of the rule book payments came in June. That total a little further down, about $17,000. And then all our expenses for state sub-state events for wrestling and basketball and other things. Obviously, those expenses a little reduced with how the year ended for us. That's about it for our income statement. Balance sheet, they're just snapshots of where we are at financially in the end of June and end of July. Our Dakota Bank, about $500,000. We could be long-term, $955,000. And then in July, Dakota Bank was up to $507,000, and then July also included that $600,000 or a $500,000 increase to accounts receivable, which was all the corporate sponsors being invoiced.
Could you go down to the cash flow, John? Okay. You can see here, this looks quite a bit different because the year's been quite a bit different. The biggest change, of course, was back in March, where we're normally at that, $700,000 for receipts range. We're at $243 because of those canceled events, and that has continued down throughout. You'll note in June we normally have a deficit there. We had a positive amount. Okay, that's because number one, our expenditures here normally reflect those team reimbursements. Those did not occur this year, and it also would reflect some of our travel and our disbursements for the summer meeting. for the staff and for the board. You'll also notice up here, this maybe wouldn't make sense in May, that we had more receipts this May than we did the prior May. That's that payroll protection plan loan, that 179.5 that came in, that impacts that. And then up top on our July receipts and expenditures, you'll see both of those are down, but generally we pay our catastrophic insurance this time of year. That's catastrophic and liability insurance, and that's normally around $180,000. So that's the difference there on the expenditure side. The income varies from year to year. So those are the differences in there.
And then our final section of this is Ranky Gray long term. Usually Brad would be here to go over this. He is currently on a flight and will be trying to join us on Zoom around 10 if we're able to accommodate that.
That's what I've been informed too. So we're going to hold off on approving item 5 until we hear from Brad. Brian, nice job. There's some big numbers up there, and for the first time doing that in person, glad to have you here, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 6, the consent agenda consisting of our vouchers, approval of our advisory committee appointments.
You should have that on your desk this morning.
Maybe.
So let's maybe just go.
Let's do that.
Those really quick.
Usually on the consent agenda, it's pretty cut and dry.
This one you didn't get to see till this morning.
Yeah.
We generally try and wait.
You can take it.
A little bit. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, like Joe said, we usually wait a little bit till end of the year, but we were fortunate to get these all filled this time. The process we go through, we accept nominations, so people put in the name if they're interested, and then it goes off for a vote for the membership for those where they're represented. So for basketball, our new members, athletic director would be Steph Ornelas from Spearfish. The superintendent is Dr. Donovan DeBoer from Parker, and our official would be Jeremy Michelson from Peter. Going down that first column on the first page, no changes in competitive cheer, sideline cheer, and competitive dance. The principal appointment would be Dr. Jason Uttermark from Aberdeen Central. Going down to football, the superintendent appointment there is Derek Berrios from North Point Jefferson. For golf, the A coach will be Jacob City, West Central. AA, Scott Amundsen, Sioux Falls Lincoln, and the superintendent, Tom Cameron, White River. Moving over to the second column on that first page, no change for gymnastics. Track and cross country, A coach will be Matt Coy from Beresford. No changes in tennis or volleyball. For wrestling, A coach representative will be John Donovan from Chamberlain. Soccer, the AA coach representative will be Ryan Beyer from O'Gorman. Moving down onto the second page, that first column for our Native American Advisory Council. We still need to potentially look for a replacement for Christian McGee from Red Cloud. I need to look into that and see if that's accurate with his terms. And then the second one down there, the in and out of season advisory committee would be Craig Boyens from the Class AA AD rep is will be Craig Boyens from Watertown. The Class A AD rep would be Bill Kurtz from Chamberlain, and the second Class A AD rep would be James Knudsen from Lakota Tech. Second column, our Sports Advisory Council. The basketball representative will be Jeremy Michelson from here. No changes to our sports medicine. You can see the advisory committee meeting dates down there. And then, can you click on that? I think the fine arts appointments are on there as well. Just as a reminder to people listening, the advisory committee structure is our first is our first stop in any rule change process that we go through. They start at the advisory level, they get through the advisory level, they go to the athletic directors vote, send a recommendation forward to our board of directors, then our board of directors takes into account the advisory vote and the AD vote, and they make decisions based on that. You see our Fine Arts Advisory Committee members here. We do have a few that are yet to be determined, but one of the big changes was in the music advisory.
Yeah, so we made changes in music advisory and speech advisory. Both of those committees were quite large. So what we did with the music advisors, we got equal representation from large schools and small schools, and band vocal, and then we also have orchestra in there. You see the two positions that are to be determined. And just for the new board members, just so you know, for the fine arts, when it comes to rules changes, it goes from our advisory committee straight to this board. There is no AD vote that goes along with that. All of the TBDs that you see in there, we're still searching for people. Some of my committees, I really struggle to find people willing to step up and serve on those committees. So with the speech advisory committee, what we did was basically just separate out debate and add some extra positions into that committee. When I've had speech advisory committee meetings, a lot of times I'll start those meetings at 9:30 in the morning and we don't get done until 5 or 6 at night.
Yeah, I was going to say, getting a bunch of debate people together to argue about rules.
Yeah, but not only do we do debate, we also do oral interp and one-act play all in one meeting, and so it turns into an extremely long meeting, and debate always is the one that has the most things to discuss. So we separated out debate and then kept interp and one-act play together. So those are the main changes that we made to the advisory committees, and then my goal is by our November meeting to have all those TBDs filled in and ready for you guys to vote on.
Okay, and you will see when we look back at our athletic ones, and even within these, most of the ones on that first page, they all follow the same structure. There's representation for the different sizes. They all include a Native American representative. On the second page, the Native American Advisory and the Sports Official Advisory, those are councils. Those are more appointed positions. They don't follow the same structure. So you'll notice on the Native American Advisory Council, we've got a legislative liaison. We've got a school liaison. We've got a community liaison. Those look a little bit different because it's more of a council than it is a straight committee. So they function a little bit differently. And the same with the Sports Officials Advisory Council. You can see there's one for each. There's one for each sport there, and then there's an AD, there's a secretary, there's a treasurer, there's an ex officio. So those operate a little bit differently than their other ones, but for the most part, we try to keep those sport advisories to the same structure. And we wanted to do the same here within our fine arts, and Brooks did a really good job of going through that and cleaning up the fine arts advisory. So I want to thank him for that.
Okay. The remaining part of the consent agenda, determine monetary value of awards to be accepted by athletes and member schools. Adoption of our mission, vision, and belief statements, knowing that possibly in November would be looking at making a mid-year adjustment of the major, and then looking to consider a request of a co-op or oral interp between the schools of Woonsocket and Sanborn Central beginning this year. All right, so those are the items of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, so moved.
And a second? Second by Tom Culver. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, that motion carried. Moving on to item 7, staff reports. Turn it over to the staff. It looks like, John, you're first on the docket there.
Yeah, I think just real quick, briefly, our idea was to just give you an update of where we're at. Obviously, all our sports are off and running. The only real two concerns I think that we I should say, three concerns when it comes to those sports. Golf, really quickly, the USGA tournament management app, still working through SDHSAA to get absolute on what we can do as far as the contactless exchange of scores and scorecards. Obviously, it's a little bit of a new concept that we're going to allow our kids to have their cell phones out on the golf course, basically, is part of the rub, but also making sure that it's workable at each course, and that our course pros are ready to take that on for us a little bit. Soccer side of things, everything's positive. We start with games already tomorrow in soccer across the state. The only real concern, again, from officials, I think games are covered and everything's good there. Just in those community park kind of settings and not in a stadium setting with the closeness of fans and some of that that's come out from officials. So we'll kind of just play that by ear and go forward with it. The same kind of bleeds into cross country, which open practice today is, course setup and the setup at the start and keeping kids somewhat distanced from each other. So we're doing some creative things, whether it's a staggered start or almost like a parabola at the start instead of a straight starting line, just doing a big hook and, maybe 3 different starting areas and they all end up in the same spot after 1,000 yards or whatever the case might be. But just being a little creative there to keep that one going. And then obviously football and the challenges therein. Probably the most effort has been spent on football about how in the heck to keep each kid with their own water bottle, to not have the common shared water that is a big touching point and a big concern of the NFHS as we talk about those sports coming together, not having 30 kids all huddle around the same 6 water bottles and the same water girl with the water crate and all that kind of a thing. So that's required some creativity on the part of our local schools, ADs, coaches, but again, it's as simple as, the kid's responsible for their helmet. Guess what? Now they're probably responsible for their water bottle all game. You just have to make some creative things to make it work for them. But again, positive reports from everything, I think, as far as having the opportunity to go and being ready to go, and just some of those maybe a little more trivial nuances that'll continue to come up. We'll just continue to work through them as best we can to be able to go forward. But again, mostly a positive report from where we're at right now.
I can continue on with tennis, cheer, dance, and volleyball. Tennis and cheer and dance opened up last week on August 3rd, getting up and running. Tennis had their first competitions, or could have their first competitions that first week in August, and there have been some matches that have gone on where that's concerned, and it seems to be going well. All of our accommodations for adjustments for our activities are posted on our website, and they were all in our rules meetings as well. So coaches are fully aware, should be fully aware if they watched the rules meeting at this point in time. Cheer and dance is kind of a cheer, dance, and volleyball being indoor sports becomes a little bit more of a concern as we move through. And cheer and dance with a large number of teams that show up for competitions is something that we have to all be mindful of. And cheer and dance likes to be in a group, and they like to hug. They like to, tell each other what a great job we've done, and that's fantastic. We just have to keep in mind that social distancing is our first and foremost here. So stunting all summer long, for groups to stunt and choreography groups, we made some adjustments to those kinds of things. So the report that I have, hopefully so far, is that the things are very positive where cheer and dance is concerned. I did visit with the ADs, and I sent out a schedule for them to kind of try and consider doing their competitions a little differently this year and work in pods. In other words, 3 teams in a pod of 3 or in a pod of 4. So instead of having 12 teams at your competition all at once, you bring in your first 3 teams, they warm up, they compete, they leave. The next 3 teams come in, they warm up, they compete, they leave, and then your final 4, or whatever your magic number is to get to however many you have, you do the same thing. They don't stick around for awards. They don't stick around to watch other teams. I've encouraged it to be live streamed. The funny part with cheer and dance is the copyright compliance. So as long as we live stream and live stream only and don't archive anything, we're okay as far as the copyright compliance issues with that are concerned. Coaches love to watch the other teams, and if they have to leave and not be able to see, well, I did better than that team, or they're always the judges anyway. So, so hopefully, I think we're trying to work through that. I think the biggest challenge to that is what do we do with the fans? The fans come and watch a 2.5-minute routine. and then their 3 teams, or that 3 teams that have just competed, leave, do the fans leave? Do they get to stay? And I don't have a good answer for that, and I've kind of tasked our athletic directors to kind of work through that a little bit and do what's best for their communities for that. I don't have a great suggestion. I know if I were queen for the day, I would probably just say that as soon as those teams are gone, they leave as well. But when you're paying, $5 to come in, it's not much different than a track meet where you watch one event, or a wrestler when it comes in and does the same type of scenario. So I think there are things, it's just going to be different, and I think those are some of the growing pains that we're going to have to work through where that's concerned.
Joe, can I ask on that, from a small school standpoint, when you've got girls that participate on the cheer and the dance, and now it's a real short maybe amount of time to change, is there any suggestions for those schools?
Yeah, just I would liken your time between the events, and what I've done is I've staggered it, so you start with, like, dance from team 1 would start, then cheer from team 2 would go, then dance from team 2 or 3 or whatever. So I've got it staggered, so there's at least 2 or 3 routines in between where they have to be. And judges are going to have to take into consideration that I may have been back changing and I'm not quite ready yet. Sure. But we don't want that to be, it's not going to be like it was last year. And the flexibility that we talked about yesterday, people are going to have to adjust and realize that this is what's best for the sport right now. So there's going to be some growing pains with it. There's no questions. And I think as we go through, we may like it. We may think that, why haven't we been doing this in cheer and dance for a long time? But we'll see where that goes. But that one still is kind of up for debate as to how that's going to go. It's a thought that came from another state. As I visited with other leaders across the state, and I kind of borrowed that idea from them, and they're giving it a try as well. So we are one of the few states that does it in the fall. There are about 3 states that do it in the fall. The others are in the winter, and we do it in the fall because of where club is. As soon as we get done in that October timeframe, November, they're starting up with their club and running. And that was kind of one of the things that got started when we started with cheer and dance. That was kind of a bargaining chip, so to speak, so that the clubs would have access to those kids at that point in time. And then volleyball, like I said, I was at a volleyball region meeting with my officials last night in Watertown, and I talked a lot about masks. I talked about schools that may mandate masks and things of that nature. I've heard that if schools are mandating masks for their spectators, are you guys doing that?
Yep.
Okay, are you expecting your officials then to wear masks as well?
We're waiting for direction from the state to let us know.
Okay. I told them last night.
Was that correct?
Yeah, I did. I did tell them last night that I felt that if they were requiring masks of their spectators, that they were going to be expected to wear them as well. Now, I believe Mitchell, if I'm not mistaken, has deemed the officials and the people that are playing on the court as essential people, and they would not have to wear masks. So my recommendation last night to them was that I kind of told them that if they weren't wearing a mask, I kind of felt like they might be a little selfish because it's for the protection of all of us. We're trying to get to the end of the season. I didn't mean that to sound harsh or anything of that nature, but I do believe that in our world today that we talked about the use of electronic whistles. I highly encourage them to get electronic whistles as well as wear masks. Electronic whistles are hard to come by right now, but there's a high demand for them, as you well know. I believe there are 11 states. Yesterday I received an email from the NFHS from Lindsay, basically that these 11 states have moved to the spring with their sport. So now the clubs are starting to come in to try and figure out how they can have a season here and a season there, and that's something that we'll have to be discussing as well. But I think for the most part, everybody's on board. Volleyball just started today with practices. Thursday, yeah, started today with practices, and I'm sure they're up and running and excited to be out there. I did have a mid-season or a summer meeting with the coaches and just kind of talked a little bit about some of the accommodations, the things that we're going to have to adjust throughout the course of the year. I think we've made some good adjustments. We're not switching sides of the net. We're staying on the same side. There isn't a coin toss. I mean, just the little things. Volleyball is a unique sport because we're with our own people, okay? So we don't have to have that interaction like we'll have in basketball and things of that nature. So I think we can protect ourselves in those means. It was funny, I don't know if I showed Dan this, but I got an email the other day where the net, they put a plastic sheet over the net to cover it so that no exposure could go through the net for people that were blocking, hitting, things of that nature. And I saw it on Facebook earlier, and I thought it was a joke. And then I got some questions from the NFHS about if your state would allow this. And SMAC, the Sports Advisory, or the Sports Medicine Advisory Committee, decided no, that's not good because of all the extra germs that could be placed on the site, and it could be more of a petri dish than anything, so they weren't recommending that. But I thought it was interesting that they were even entertaining that. Not a bad idea. The other thing I tasked you with yesterday with volleyball was just to think a little bit about a cutoff date for schools that may not be participating in our fall sports, and should there be a cutoff date? Should we, I think originally we talked about an October 15th date, which would be about a week and a half before where we would start our postseason play. Saying that maybe, for volleyball anyway, I felt that they should have at least a contest in by that date. They would still be seeded, the last seed coming in their particular region, but we're going to see that as we go through some of the alignments and things, that there will be areas that will be very limited and will be participating in that particular region. So whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, that's just the beauty of the beast that we have right now. So that's the only thing that I would task you with here, to kind of give us a little direction today for volleyball. And I don't know if football wants something pursuant to that cross country as well, but I do think there needs to be something in place so that we can have the comfort level and have your support with any date that's decided where that's concerned. Okay.
I have yet to mention this. I've neglected to mention this. New chair of the NFHS Volleyball Rules Committee is our own Miss Jill.
Oh, congratulations.
So,
Thank you.
she will have a big share in shaping volleyball rules for the entire country. So, really cool thing, and really well deserved.
Thank you. It's very exciting.
Don't mess it up.
4 more years. 4 more years.
Let's keep volleyball great.
There you go.
Brooks, or we say except we shouldn't.
So, item 16 on the agenda kind of goes over all of the fine arts things for the fall. So I'm not going to go into great detail, but I will just say I encourage all of you and anybody listening, every administrator in the state should go onto the NFHS website and find the link for their aerosol spray study. There's, I believe, an hour-long webinar that's recorded, and it's on their YouTube channel. I'd encourage you guys to watch it, just to help everyone get an understanding of the struggles that you're going to find in fine arts classrooms and virtual spaces when dealing with COVID and the spray of aerosol particles. So if you get a free hour, hop on and sit down and watch that. It's pretty interesting, and we'll go over it more at item 16.
Yeah, the only other thing we talk about here is we had our state tournament directors meeting. We did that over Zoom. We went through that a little bit yesterday in terms of the management fee, or what I don't like the term management fee because it sounds like we're collecting money from them, but that's what we're paying to the schools that are hosting our state events to help them with their costs. We did walk through that with them and talk to them about our hosting, our management fees, and the intention with that T-shirt or the merchandise contract was to use that funding to increase the payouts that we give, because particularly in some of our larger events, they have situations where they end up losing a lot of money, and the town is benefiting, local businesses are benefiting, the schools are having to foot the bill for that above and beyond what we're paying out. So you'll see later on that right now we're not recommending any changes to our management fees, but we are going to revisit that in the spring once we have a better idea of what this school year looks like in terms of what our state events are, what we're able to hold, what we're able to allow in terms of spectators, and how that reflects within our merchandise contract and our TV contract and in our all the rest of our finances. I mean, you've seen the percentage of our revenue that's based off of ticket sales. So we appreciate what they do. That's a lot of work that they do locally when we put on a state event and help us with that. So we met with them, then we had our new ADs meeting. What did we end up with, about 16?
I think we had 15 there, and then I met with another one in person on the Friday after, so 16 that went through the training, if you will.
Yeah. We went up to the Capital University Center up here and used that facility. That worked really well. I told you yesterday, I told them all they picked a heck of a time to get into administration. But really good group of people coming in for ADs. And I'm sure we taught them everything that they could possibly need to know. Then I didn't get anything from the foundation or from the School Superintendent's Association.
Dan, we have a question up on the chat there. I can answer if you're all right.
Yeah.
So anybody listening, Jordan Bauer is asking if the live stream option, if that's the same for concerts and plays.
In terms of copyright.
In terms of copyright, correct, that you can live stream as long as you don't archive. Yes, for concerts, plays are a different story. From what I've heard, some theatrical publishing companies are allowing live streams without having to buy a license to do that. Many others are not, and so you'll have to check to see what the rights you have when you buy that play to do it. So that's something people have to check with their theater directors and find out what kind of rights they have with the play that they're using.
Can I just make one comment on the state tournament directors meeting? I think there's been some confusion on kind of that procedure and stuff, and I would recommend that we maybe do some more Zoom meetings with those state tournament directors going through that process. You know, you want to do it in the spring, but maybe having discussions before then to kind of start laying out some of those foundations on that. And then I'd also recommend state tournament directors that are going to be doing it next year too, so they might not be doing any this year, but they might be doing some next year, just to get their input too. That way we're kind of all on the same page on how that money will be spent or looked at, or just so we're all on the same page and maybe more transparent, and so everybody kind of understands where we're going with that, so that way we all have a better understanding, and then we can report that back to the board and to all other schools. So I think that would be a good idea. But
So do you think meeting with the group after fall events?
I think yeah, I think so. At least to send out something saying, here's what we're thinking about, and then do a fall one, winter one, and then, you know what I mean? So we can, and I would include next year's fall tournament ones too. And, because we might be hosting one this year and not hosting another one for a couple of years. So at least getting the input of somebody next year who's not hosting it all this year too, I think would be a good idea. At least so they know when they start budgeting things and how to figure out how we're running it and stuff like that. It might be good. And then there's some people that are new that have never run a state tournament, and it might be good for them to have that dialogue with everybody else in the room or on Zoom or something. So.
I think also state event directors, you know, I think a couple of years ago we tasked you with kind of giving us an itemized list of what, you know, keeping good track of those kinds of things I think would be helpful for us as well as you go through those events this year and in future years.
Great. And nobody from the foundation here today. And you said nothing from the superintendents? Okay.
Dan.
All right, moving on then to item 8, change to officials fees. I don't know if Joe or Dan, which one of you want to take point on this? Okay. Or John?
Yeah, so the changes that we're recommending here, none of them are real huge, but it's just sort of making sure we're keeping up cross country, changing from $80 to $100 and adding that per diem in terms of the incidentals. For football, the replay official, for the crew of officials, this isn't per person, this is for the crew, correct? Mm-hmm. To change from $100 to $125. The soccer, the fourth official, changing that from 75 to 100. And then for volleyball, our line judges, changing from a $25 a day for incidentals to the per diem like everyone else gets. And then for lodging, actual costs for lodging, we had been making them pay for their own hotel rooms, and it's a losing effort by the time you're done with that for the weekend. We want to make sure that we continue to get people who want to line judge at our state events. And then the mileage as well for going up. Those are the changes that we are recommending.
Okay. So at this time, I entertain a motion to adopt those changes. By Mr. Weismantel.
Second.
And second by Mr. Callie. Discussion. Hearing no, with asking a discussion. Our vote then, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Okay, item number 9, conduct our second reading on the changes to the Fine Arts Handbook. And turn that over maybe to Brooks here on this.
There's no updates since last time, so if you have any questions.
Same as the first reading.
Same as the first reading? All right, so being this is the, did we cut you off there, Brooks? Did anybody have any questions specific for Brooks?
Did we have to change anything with going online? Did we have to change anything in our policy book about that?
That was already in there for debate and oral interpret, and those are the main ones.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so this is a second reading, so we're looking to adopt this today. Is there a motion to adopt the changes to the Fine Arts Handbook?
Motion, Rasmussen.
And a second?
Soma?
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor to adopting those changes, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, that motion carried. Item 10, consider changes to host management fees for this coming year.
Okay, so the first 5 pages here, those are our rental fees. That's what we're paying out for different items at each of these events. It varies quite a bit. You can see from, when we're at the Premier Center at Ruxmore Plaza, there's rental fee, there's custodial, there's facility fees, there's box office, there's charges for ticket printing, charges for ticket sales, to just flat fees that we're paying out to facilities for the use of that facility, whether it's custodial or whether it's rental, like at the Swiftell. So there's no changes to those right now. On that last page those are our management fee schedules for hosting events. And that's what I was talking about earlier, and that's what we've been looking at right here. This is what we're paying to the member schools, or to our site hosts, our school hosts. So when we host boys basketball, Class A or AA, Jordan and Jared or Casey, they get $8,500 to help them pay for workers, anything that they need. Costs much more than that for the school to do it. Okay. One of the bigger ones we look at is wrestling. If we go down here, wrestling, they get $11,000 for a combined tournament. Last year, Casey spent more than that just on the hospitality. Okay, so it ends up being, in some cases, a loss to the schools, and then when you factor in substitute teachers for the people who are working, it can add up quite a bit. So our thoughts with the merchandise contract that we did was that when we had gathered the data 2 years ago, we had found that the combined net profit for all these events for t-shirt sales was $15,000. That's everybody on down the line. And we thought, well, we could put on a merchandise contract, see what we get, and that would be much more impactful than this $15,000 spread out across. And the majority of that $15,000 was in probably track and field, just a couple, track and field and basketball, probably, in a couple of different events. So our thought was, if we can get this merchandise money, and we can take that money and we can use that to increase these fees to the host school, because we don't have a pile of money within our budget to add a bunch of money to it. Local chambers of commerce haven't, in some cases they have been, but by and large, they haven't been pitching in money to help these schools with these costs. So the only way we make an impactful amount of money to put back to this, to pay the schools that are doing the work of hosting it, is either to increase ticket prices, or you reduce what you're paying back to schools in state tournament reimbursement, or we find a new revenue stream. So we don't want to increase ticket prices. We don't want to take money that's going back to schools if we don't have to. So we looked at a new revenue stream. We put the merchandise bid out. We got a $75,000 bid on that. We're going into our first year with that, and of course there's a lot of uncertainty. So in a normal year, we got our bid, we would have met with our state tournament directors and divvied that extra $75,000 out within this schedule here. Okay? Of course, we're not in a regular year. We don't know what events we're gonna, our hope is to hold every one of our events. We don't know that. Our hope is that we have whatever crowds we want to have, but that's probably not likely, particularly at indoor events that we're hosting. So, because of that, we don't know what our revenue is going to be. If we have to end up postponing events, canceling events, we lose some of our TV revenue money. We lose that gate money. We lose some of our merchandise money. So it didn't make sense for us to start the school year out with a whole new set of obligations here for our member schools. We thought, let's get through the year, let's see what we're able to have, and then we can look at these events at the end of the year. We're leaving that money within our budget. When you see it later on at this meeting, you can see there's, I think it's $63,000 that's allocated, or that's unallocated in our budget. That's going to go into this, okay? And really, what we'd like to do is that whole $75,000 to go into this. But so that's our intent right now. So at the moment, we're keeping this as is with the intention, like Randy said, rather than waiting for the spring, we meet up after the fall sports are done, see what we're able to have, and see what we can, and start working on these new figures for the year. Okay? The $75,000 isn't going to make everybody whole. We had an event last year where, the balance sheet, they showed a loss of $38,000 to the school for hosting that event. Obviously, this $75,000 isn't going to be able to make everybody fully whole, but it goes a long ways towards helping them justify continuing to do that to their school or within their school. So the recommendation right now is to keep this as is. However, we're going to meet later this year with that unallocated money, look at what we ended up having, look at what we can do to put that money into here moving forward. I see Casey and Jordan are on here. If either of them would like to speak to this.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Mr. Miley, do you want to go first?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to, for state wrestling, just as an example, in the Sioux Falls School District, we lost $30,000, and that's after we got the $11,000. Just Friday, and that's because we added another day to the tournament. So now it runs Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and all day, and the amount of staff that you took. And just for an example, on Friday, for the lunch hour, within 30 minutes, all the food in the hospitality room was completely gone. We had coaches walking out of there with 4 sandwiches, giving them to their athletes. And we were monitoring it, we had people there, but of course, anytime you say something, it doesn't go well with those. But I don't think any school should have to front $30,000 to run an event that cleared $150,000 in gate receipts. I shared with Dan that I looked at Mark Miley's records from 1992, and every year there was a letter to the executive director saying the fees aren't adequate. So I would hope at some point we can kind of come to a resolution on increasing these or some type of bid process, and I'm fine with the bid process. Sioux Falls probably won't do that because our CBB has not given us money in the past and still doesn't. So we may lose out on those, but I don't think a school should have to lose that amount of money. And I disagree with this year because I understand that we may not have fans, but the amount of personal protective equipment, sanitization, screening, there's still going to be people that need to do that, and then you're going to have to hire to do that, and it's still going to cost money, whether you have fans or not, and to run that event. And I hope we have events, and I hope we have them with fans. So I would ask that we really do take this into consideration, and the documents if you guys want me to provide that, I've provided that information, and Mark Miley has provided it since 1992, so I don't know what more we would need for financial records moving forward. So it kind of feels like we're just keep kind of, for lack of better terms, kicking the can down the road a little bit.
Thanks, Casey.
Thank you, guys. Yep.
Jordan?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I would just echo a lot of everything that Casey said. Prior to me being here, I don't have any of those records like Casey does. Jerry may have some of those. I know we've got record in my 2 years here at Central, detailed records of what we have and haven't spent at the tournaments. Dan, you mentioned it's not a normal year, and I would agree with that. So I think it is time that we look at cutting back on some of those items that Casey talked about. I don't know that it's our job as the event host to feed all the coaches. Obviously the workers, hospitality is a huge piece of what we do, and clearly the most expensive part. So I think it's time that we maybe sit down and look at cutting back some of those additional costs that are more more of a perk than a necessity to run the tournament. I think, I also want to be part of the solution. I don't want to just bring a bunch of problems to the board and not have any answers for you guys. So, I would be willing to sit down with Dan and John and Joe and the staff and any of the other event directors and work at trying to put something together, whether it's a cost sharing method of the other schools around the state, or whatever other ideas that are out there, and allow the membership to help us try to continue to run the events as best we can for the kids. But at the same breath, we have to do our part. We all work for somebody in our district, and it is hard to go back to our business manager and our school boards when we're putting these kinds of bills for the tournaments that we're putting on. So I would welcome any ideas from staff or the board, you folks, on how we can help maybe try to come to a resolution on this and moving forward so we can continue to provide a great event for our kids.
Jordan, you kind of cut out there at the end.
I just said I'd welcome any thoughts from the board or from the staff on any ideas on how we can try to come to a resolution on this so we can continue to provide great opportunities and great events for our students.
All right, thank you, sir.
Sure. Yeah. I would just share and echo kind of what Casey said at the end there. If you look at the vast majority, and I don't want to say all, but almost all, every other state association, we're backwards in our operations here. Every other state association is getting paid to take an event to a town. And we are paying towns to host an event. For example, in Nebraska, and Dr. Monarch has shared this, with you in previous years when they bid it out. It's a very highly competitive. We're going to give you money on top of the gate money you're going to make to bring this event to our community, and then that CBB and that chamber is helping with that, so it's not putting our schools in a position of absorbing these losses, but it is a Sioux Falls Sports Authority or a Mitchell Sports Authority or a Rapid City Sports and Convention Bureau kind of a group that helps us on that. And for whatever reason, we've never done that. And a lot of it, I think, the historical in talking to Wayne and talking to Marlon it's been an opinion of, well, we want to try and spread these events around and take them to every community every so often because it's nice to do that. But now when we're hearing from especially our two largest school districts that host the majority of our events, the challenges that they're facing financially, I would encourage as and I know you'll appoint them later today, the site selection committee, but at the board level, to really take a strong look at that conversation. Because again, it's literally every other state that it's the opposite. That the state associations are receiving money from those host communities. Look at the different sports in Minnesota where they've got a free use of US Bank Stadium for state football semifinals and finals, and we're paying $50,000 for 7 games. If you look at a hockey at the Excel, again, also because of some arrangements that they have where they're getting money to take that to St. Paul, where football and hockey in North Dakota and basketball in North Dakota, they're getting money from those communities to take those events. I know that when I was in Columbus in Nebraska, we bid, and our CVB kicked in money to host a state golf tournament. So even though the smaller non-revenue, we're not even taking 8. I just think there's something with our model, even a step further, that would still allow our schools and our people like Casey, like Jordan, like Randy, like those across the state, like Gene Brownell, that do a phenomenal job of hosting our events to still do that, but now take that financial burden off of them by just looking at a little bit different model potentially on how we can do this. So again, obviously not what we're asking you today. Today let's keep with this model for the next year, because obviously we can't do a bid process for something that's happening in a month or two, but probably something we really need to take a strong look at. I think it is. It's not disagreeing one iota with what Casey or Jordan said about the difficulties it presents them, but should that solely be 177 member schools being willing to pick that bill up, or are there other sources, kind of like Dan said, other sources we can find and tap into to help continue to put on those quality events? So, thank you.
Chairman, can I comment on this? I just want to echo and agree with what Casey, Jordan, what John had talked about. I mean, this is something that's been talked about in our district for years. It's great that the events are hosted in Sioux Falls and Rapid City, but I think there's a little bit of an unfair expectation that the host schools that are running these events are picking up the tab at the end, and that tab is kind of unknown until the event's over. I know our school district cannot continue to sustain those payments or picking up the costs, additional costs. I think every school district probably feels that way, especially this year. And it is a challenge, but I think I like your idea, John. We talked about this at our local level. I think we need to look and explore a different model of how a bidding. I think we talked about a bidding process before, and just seeing what cities are really interested in hosting these events. I'd like to see us put maybe a subcommittee together this year. I know we're too late in the process to change anything, but I'd like subcommittee together or a group together here that can explore these options. I know John's done some, it sounds like you've done some work looking at what other states are doing, so that we can get out there and really look at some models out there that are working with their local communities. I think in the past I've heard this as well. Well, go to your Chamber of Commerce, go to the city, ask them for money. They're benefiting the hotels, the food places, the retailers. It's not that simple, number one. And number two, it's not the host school's responsibility to go out and seek those funds to offset those costs from their communities. I know some might think that. That's not any school district's responsibility. So I think we need to really explore this further down the road. And, this probably takes some time, so I think the sooner we could do something like this, the better. Because revenue is going to be a big item of discussion, I think, for everybody this year. If we're going to have events, who's picking up those costs? I think we're going to inadvertently push school districts away from wanting to host these events or take on that responsibility because they don't want to absorb the costs. So I think this is a conversation we need to have frequently and often. Thank you.
I think anybody who puts on a tournament wants to put on a great tournament for the fans, for the athletes, for the coaches. But I do agree that the hospitality rooms, unless you have help from your CVB or your city, it's daunting. And to do it right and to make sure that everybody is feeling good about it, and you still get complaints, even though they're getting free food. So I think part of that process too is looking at whether that's something we need to keep, or I think that could be a huge expense taken away that we don't have to deal with as part of that too. So I think that's something we should really look at as a group too, or subcommittee, or state tournament advisors that are going to be hosting these things.
So we have it as a goal.
We do have it as a goal.
When we get to that point, maybe we need to flesh out that goal with some timelines.
Yep.
Set. What do we?
We started on it last year.
Yeah.
We did some preliminary work on some of the bid things. Isaac had looked into sort of what our minimum bids would need to be to cover our costs. And then everything was fine. At the end of the day, I'm sure it feels like we are kicking the can down the road with this. We're putting in the work. We found $75,000 in revenue that we're going to put into this. We've got it as a goal moving forward to look at this. I don't disagree with one single thing that either Casey or Jordan or Mike or Randy has said here. And John is right in that I think our model itself is a little bit backwards, and schools are the ones that aren't financially benefiting from having the tournament in their city, and they're the ones doing the work, and doesn't seem right. And I absolutely understand that it's hard to go back to your school board and say, hey, we're hosting this for the association, here's our bill for it. It's a tough thing to do. So we found this extra money, we're putting that money into this, and do have it as a goal to continue looking at that bid process and keep pushing forward with it. And I think it's sometimes disruption in life leads to changes that needed to happen anyway, and I think it's a good time to maybe look at resetting the whole model. So I'm in favor of I agree with everything that's been said.
Do we want to, if we have a motion to approve this, make part of the motion that money is included in there so these guys can go back to their school boards?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, to me that makes sense, and they can tell their school board members, hey, this is the fee, but here's a motion that says this.
Approve the host management fee with the $75,000 merchandise fee to be included at the end of the year. Here's my thing. I don't know how if we don't have some of our events, our merchandise fee shrinks. So maybe we tie it into whatever our merchandise income, we tie it into whatever that is. And we'll have documentation as to what that is, but that, we're not saying we're gonna put this $75,000 into it, and then at the end of the year, we had to cancel some of our events and we end up getting $40,000 instead of 75.
Yeah, I think if you don't say the dollar amount, but you say the merchandise fee, then you're safe.
Absolutely fine. Yeah.
I guess I would echo what Randy said a little bit, and then realize when our wrestling coaches go to wrestling, we send meals, we pay their meals as a district, and gladly. I would expect that wrestling, our coach gets 5 sandwiches. But I get how hard it is to police that, so that I'm not in any way putting that on the hospitality. You know, when we came to Rookies for football, saw all the time that everyone's putting in, Randy's putting in. Well, you shouldn't have to police going in there and taking 5 sandwiches out of the hospitality room. So I guess I'm frustrated with if that's happening, I'm frustrated by that. I don't know how to fix it, but so maybe that's part of the conversation at some point is, do we need $30,000 of a hospitality room if coaches are going in and abusing it? I mean, if I was doing it with my staff and said, hey, we'll provide you lunch, and then someone comes in and takes 5 Subways, it's like, well, then I can't do this for you. So I don't know how to get that message out without sounding negative. Yeah. Because coaches work hard, they totally get that, they put in tons of time, but like I said,
and sounds like we're picking on wrestling here, but that's
that's a good point. Yeah.
But that's one event where it's almost every school, and that's the one event where there's an expectation of a hospitality room. We don't have a hospitality room for coaches for cross country or for track, some of those other huge events that involve almost every school. For some reason, it's there for wrestling, and it's always been there for wrestling. And I'll be honest, you know, the way they were treating Casey and Casey's staff last year was embarrassing. And so there's some things we need to look at in the broader sense there. Which hurts to say because I love wrestling and I'm a wrestling guy, but that's where I think in the broader picture, it's maybe a good year to look at some of those other changes that will help out.
All the more reason to explore a bid process. I mean, if you have a city that wants to host a tournament, they're gonna, obviously, you know, they're gonna, the local hosting school district is going to work with their city, and they're gonna work out all those logistics as part of their bid. We're gonna pay for a hospitality room, we're gonna offer this, we're gonna offer this. That's all part of the package they're willing to submit. Yeah. So that takes a lot of responsibility, I think, off of local schools, because everybody wants to have those things. But unfortunately, you know, great points. If you know everyone's taking 5 sandwiches instead of 1, that might seem very minuscule in conversation, but actually that adds up over the weekend, and that's a cost that every school district then has to absorb. So that's, you know.
And in this situation, the food was gone before he got to feed any of his workers.
Yep.
So then they had to order additional food just so that to make sure that his workers got something, and that can't happen. So
the hospitality room becomes an entitlement, and sometimes it's people that are, whether it's administrators, whether it's coaches, whether it's whoever, also all the families come in too, and you've got kids that are 6, 7, 10, 15 years old that are being fed through the hospitality room as well. So it's hard to manage, and I completely understand what you're saying.
From my experience on a smaller level,
it's not just wrestling, it happens at Dan.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I know you're a wrestler. It isn't just a wrestling what happens.
And Jordan, I was just going to speak on that from a smaller school level. I'm never going to have to worry about hosting a state event, even though there's a lot of cross-country coaches that believe we should have the state meet in Falk, and that's not happening. But being a district and a region chairperson for a number of years in our sub-state situations with smaller schools traveling and having to eat the cost on that. A number of years ago, we just went away. We just basically got rid of it. Now, it was a much smaller amount, but we dealt with a smaller budget. So from a percentage standpoint, it really did save some money to our districts in the north central part of the state. And I won't lie, that first year, when we go to a district tournament, and I'm probably becoming one of the good old boys, but when I was younger, when the good old boys would come and there was no hospitality room, we heard about it. But it was like a 1 year, everybody got used to it after the first year, and then the entitlement somewhat went away. But again, I think you want to put on a good event, and hopefully those host communities, if there was an RFP process, would step up. And I would caution those communities, as long as it's done in the right way, and we don't see an increase in hotel fees, for example, because you'd be cutting off your nose to spite your face on that one.
Can I just say, a bid process scares me for fine arts. Everybody wants wrestling in their town. Everybody wants football. I don't know if people are going to be fighting each other to get state roller turf festivals. So if we are going to form a committee, I strongly encourage you guys to put some fine arts people on there so we have a lot of input, because that's going to apply to big problems.
Yeah, that's a great point. That was my concern with the limited number of venues and the fatigue of Rapid City and Sioux Falls. Could some of these go unbid at all? You know, the point where once you draw your parameters, there's only a few people that can host some of these events, and after a while, they probably say, we're tired of this, you know. So yeah, I worry with what you said, folks.
I worry with some of our gymnastics as a money hole, you know.
You wanted to...
Yeah, Brookings wants to get back in.
I thought we talked it's quiet. A lot of good conversation there. So what I'm going to do is entertain a motion. Hopefully I read this correctly. So item 10, consider changes to the host management fees for 2021 with merchandise fees generated in 2021 ear tag to state tournament host schools to cover expenses.
So over.
Is there a second? Mark Murphy. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passed. Item 11, corporate sponsorships. Dan?
Yeah, the only change in here is that, well, there's two changes. That Fine Designs bid that says $75,000, that's the merchandise bid that will go towards the management fees.
Can you explain that again, Dan? Just to the 75,000. You said something we won't have 75 because we have less coming in, or I don't know. You just said we had 60.
Just the way the budget ended up, because the budget fluctuates every year. We budget for 100% expenditures, which is sort of a guess anyway. You'll see when we get to our budget, the way the budget's presented right now, we've got, I think, $64,000 surplus. And there's a line item down there below it that says $75,000 and what our actual year-end budget would be with that $75,000 out, which would be, it'd be a loss of $11,000 right now. So, but there's that money that's unallocated right now.
Right.
So, but that's budgeted at 100% team reimbursements for state expenditures.
So the 75,000.
Could shrink if we don't have, for example, state golf. We might say, okay, that was worth $2,000.
Right. So that's in our agreement. We can get up to 75,000.
It's 75,000, and then it's a percentage. It's 35% of the gross sales above, I think, $350,000.
Right. So the 75,000.
It's a base.
It's a base, but we don't get that base unless every one of our state tournaments take place.
Correct.
In the contract, that's what it says.
Yeah. Just like our SDPB bid, that's technically $100,000.
Yeah.
But because last year we didn't have our state basketball tournaments, or we had 6.5 of our state basketball tournaments, or 5.5 of our state basketball tournaments, excuse me. They had people that had purchased ad revenue for the state tournaments that wanted their money back.
Right.
So we worked out a deal. We worked something out between them So basically, we're giving them a credit for the next 2 years to split that loss. Okay, but the contract we have now, it has a assigned percentage for each event. If that event does not happen, then our contract shrinks by that amount. It's going to be the same within the Fine Designs thing as well. So
thanks for explaining that.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
So we've got our corporate partners, the 4 monitoring ones in billion, in kind. None of those have changed. Our Baden Ball bid, our TB bid with SDPB, again, that's going to be in the 90 to 93,000 in the next 2 years, and then it goes up to I think 106 or 104, 106, 108,000 for the next years after that. We got our merchandise bid from Fine Designs. We've got from the NFHS network for 35. We've got the Alliance Highway Safety for 20. So we had, in the past, we had a $10,000 one from Huddle for e-ticketing. Their model has changed. Now it's based on usage rather than a guaranteed $10,000. So we're not putting anything into our budget right now for that because we don't know what it's going to be.
Okay.
But after state tournament gate receipts, this is our next level of revenue. We get a vast majority of our money from state tournament and gate receipts. The next thing down is from our sponsorship. So we're really appreciative of that. It allows us to do a lot of things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So this funding helps us to pay for catastrophic insurance for kids, a lot of other things.
Thanks, Dan. Motion to approve corporate sponsorships. Is there a second?
Second, Soma.
All right, motion by Wiseman, second by Soma. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And that motion carried. Okay, moving on to item 12, prices for state tournament programs.
That's been up to $5. We talked with our state tournament directors. They're comfortable with that figure. So we'll move forward. I think it's been that way for quite a while.
Okay, motion by Rasmussen.
Second.
Second Tally. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Okay, this will be the second reading of a budget. We have a little bit of time until Mr. Reinke's available, so let's go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just run through quickly the changes that are on there. I spoke to the board about this yesterday, but for people listening, big change in the 4100 is shifting things from the combined tournaments to individual tournaments. So you'll see the line items where it's a $200,000 decrease, $150,000 decrease, and then you've got other increases down here. So those are all based off of historical gates at those venues. In terms of the sponsorship revenue, as we move down, there's a $10,000 from e-ticketing that had been there that is not there any longer. We made some adjustments to our sub-state revenue. We did better than expected last year, so we bumped our girls basketball one up. Same with boys basketball. We were $20,000 under on football, so we split the difference there. For this year, the others remain the same. Down here is the 4,400 is that fee revenue. That's the participation fees, which is $60 per sport, per school, or per sport or activity per school. And then the postage, press pass, media fee. And then in our general revenue, we've got our membership dues, which is 20 cents a student, minimum of $30 per school, maximum of $300 per school. Rule books, registration of officials, and just some other things. So if you go up there, John, so you can see, as I was talking about there, we've got a $2.7 million revenue line item. $1.471 million of that comes from state tournament gate receipts. $584,000 of that comes from sponsorship revenue. $390,000 of that comes from sub-state revenue, 185,000 of that comes from fees to our schools, and then 131,000 comes from more general revenue. On the expenditure side, change here is the SDRS, or the health insurance. There was a decrease to that, decrease in our premium rates, and some other changes that have gone on. For our legislative audit, that's one of the bigger changes we have there. You can see we had budgeted 12. That's generally what it's been. You can see the cost. We had budgeted 12. The cost is $25,735. We're required by state law to be audited through DLA, the Department of Legislative Audit. Talking with them because of new systems that we're using and new systems that they're using. It probably won't be this 25. It's probably going to be in that $18,000 to $20,000 range, but we're going to bump it up to that $25,000 figure to be safe moving forward for our audit. Down here, there was a corresponding part of this on the revenue side as well, but this decrease in staff travel from $38,000 in the past. Ryan talked about that in the financial report. We recognize, we put that money in as the implied value of the donation from Billion for the vehicles that we use. So we're removing that on the revenue side, and we're also removing that on the expenditure side. So that's where that $38,000 difference comes from. That's coming out of both sides. Beyond that, we're reducing staff travel because I think we're going to be able to do a lot more. I'm going to rely on Zoom a little bit more and save some money there for some of our advisory committee meetings. Moving down here for supplies, no big change. Scroll up one more time, John. I'm sorry. See right here in line 5365. That's the catastrophic liability insurance. That's for a portion of what we pay for that catastrophic insurance for every student in the state. $7.65 per participant. And that covers them from $25,000 up to $1 million. Something catastrophic were to happen to them on the playing field, and unfortunately, we've had to use that several times in the last couple of years. When it needs to be used, it's a lifesaver for those families. So, but the change there is we got a credit for that because we had been charged ahead last year, and then of course we didn't have our spring sports, so there was a credit for that coming back. So there's a little bit of a savings there. As we go down again here, the E&O liability insurance, the excess liability insurance, the participant liability insurance, those are all down here. Those are insurance that we pay as well, and there was credits in most of those for the same reason for last year. So we've got our G&A expenses there, and then as we move down, we have our athletics and our fine arts expenses. There's nothing really drastic here. Again, a lot of it is dependent upon where we're at, where the tournament is being hosted, what the historical gates were at those places. Nothing fundamental has changed within those. You can see our athletics expenses went from $792 to $847. A lot of that is a factor of where we're at again. Generally corresponding changes in the same way on the revenue side. So if we keep going down, same thing with our fine arts. Some of these will change depending on if we hold events virtually. Our expenses will change quite a bit. But for now, we're planning here. So our fine arts expenses, there's a decrease of $21,900 in those expenses. So at the end of the day, here's what I was talking about, Randy. We've got a budgeted revenue of $2,763,820. These are our three main expense items here. 1.612 for G&A, which is general and administrative, 847, 870 for the athletics, 239, 645 for the fine arts. That ends up at just over $2.7 million for our budgeted expenses at this point. So with this budget, we've got a surplus right now of $63,493.50, and that includes that $75,000 for the merchandise fee. Okay, so below that you see the $75,000 there. And assuming we also distribute that $75,000 out, then our year-end loss would be $11,506.50. But again, it's
this year.
Everything is, even on a good year, everything is flexible within our budget and our year-end. Again, we budget our team expenses at 100%. We're generally more conservative on the revenue side. Generally, in the past several years, we've ended up really fairly close at the end of the year. So, but you can see here, that's where that $63,493 is there, because none of that $75,000 is reflected within that expense budget at this point. The existing management fees are reflected within there, but the additional $75,000 aren't allocated within they're on the revenue side, but they're not allocated within the expenditure side yet, if that makes sense. So that's where that money is, and then it would get allocated within there, and really we'd be looking at somewhere around in there, and we could make some adjustments to bring that back to zero, but it would just be more for optics than anything else. So,
do you know what percentage for the huddle that we did bring in? Did they tell us what we brought in? It wasn't over the 10,000, so I'm assuming was it pretty minimal?
It was, yeah, it was pretty minimal.
So I just wonder if that'll change this year with how things are working, if that'll go up or down, you know.
And, you know, in general, as if they get more schools within our state to use it during the regular season, we get a percentage of that as well. We're not pushing that right now.
Right.
You know, we did recommend some cashless transaction systems or e-ticketing, but whatever schools find that works for them. So we just don't have anything in there for revenue right now because we don't know what that is. So with that $10,000, we'd basically be at break even budget right now with that $75,000 out.
Thanks, Dan. So looking for a motion to approve the budget.
So moved.
Motion by Colbert, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mann. All in favor?
And that was by Marty.
Okay.
Wiseman.
All right. And that second by Marty. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hey, that carried. I see that Brad's on with Ranky Gray. So Brad, we passed over you. Can you hear us, Brad?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, so you have the floor to go over investments.
Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate you guys giving me the ability to slide in here late. I'm actually sitting in the airport in Dallas right now. Found a kind of quiet spot, so hopefully we'll get through this okay. The report you have up in front, you guys have looked at this before, and we talked about this earlier in the year with the market being down as hard as it was in the first quarter. We've seen a nice recovery in the second quarter and continuing on in the third quarter. If you look at the upper left-hand corner of the portfolio return, trailing 12 months, we're up over 5%. Year to date, which is the middle column, we're down slightly. That's due primarily to one investment, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a second. What's most important to me is that far right-hand column in the upper left-hand corner under the cent start date. You see the portfolio is still up nearly 7%, 6.81% annualized. Which when you compare that to where money market and CD rates are right now, I think a one-year CD, the national average is about 0.15%, so significantly above that. we've gone through a lot in this short year, and there's still some clouds on the horizon, but we feel very comfortable with how we're allocated to this point. Again, trying to shoot for that mix around 60-40, equities to non-equities, and we're very close to that in our mix, but we just did a rebalance of the portfolio here within the last week or so. And so we're sitting where we think we're pretty good. Now, staying on this page, if you go down to the account performance section, you'll notice some negative numbers in there for FS investments. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. FS investments went through a public listing in late June. That public listing, my thoughts was ill-advised, but I understand why they did it. But we're in a market where people love liquidity, and there was a rush to the doors of people selling this. Our advice to all of our clients is to be patient. We think that it's woefully undervalued at this point, and you can see with it down 47%. That's all since June. It's actually up off of the bottom where it was fairly significantly, and it's been trending higher as we see more and more institutional money come back into this investment. We're not concerned about the long-term prospects at this point, but in the interim, you don't like to have that one piece that's down that hard and everything else is working pretty well. That's why we're broadly diversified as well. And, if you look at the CCF long-term account right above FS investments, if you take FS investments out, we're up 3.5% year to date, which is right where we want to be. So we're monitoring this. Like I said, we don't like to see investments go down. It doesn't happen very often. When they do, we monitor it close, and we'll be giving advice going forward. But at this point, it's to ride through with it. Still paying a great dividend. The dividend, I haven't looked at the price yet today. It's somewhere around 18%. The dividend is coming off of this, so we can afford a little bit of downturn on this, and it doesn't take long to make it back up to the dividend side. So, any questions about this portion of the portfolio?
Doesn't appear to be.
Okay, if not, if we can slide forward to the spreadsheet. There we go. So spreadsheet, you can see total operating funds. I'm sure Ryan went through this earlier. 524,653.95. No new allocations since January from the CCF to the operating account. So if you look at where our implied value of the CCF right now, 1.39 million, that's kind of right where we want to be. Historically, that's kind of the level right now. 1.4 million is where we want to be. And obviously have ample cash there available if need be for the association in these strange times with managing through COVID. So that's all I've really got for today, unless anybody has any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Brad? Thanks for chiming in with us there, Brad.
Hey, you bet, guys. Sorry I couldn't be there, but actually been on a family trip, and kind of excited to be able to get out of the state for a little bit.
All right, stay safe.
All right, thanks, guys. Take care.
Okay, we're going back to item 5. So at this time, combined with what was just presented and what Ryan went over earlier, looking for a motion to approve the financial reports. So moved, Soma. Is there a second? Second, Murphy. Second, Murphy. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, we're at about 10:02. I'm gonna go ahead and put us in recess until 10:10. And we'll pick back up. I think we're on item 14, I believe. Yep. So those of you on Zoom or listening, we're going to go on recess here real quick, give everybody a chance to stretch their legs, go to the restroom, and we'll be back live at 10 after 10 or real close to that. We are in recess.
Association Board of Directors meeting is currently in recess or executive session. Please stand by for continued live audio coverage.
He worked out early, practiced late, and studied well into the night. The next day, he did it all over again.
She missed time hanging out and socializing with friends so she could make it on time to practices and games.
He became a top student and a confident leader, even as he helped his team win back-to-back conference titles.
She became a role model in her community, even as she led her team to an undefeated season.
And when they finished playing high school sports, what did they do next?
She graduated from college with honors and went to work for a successful company.
He attended graduate school and became a difference maker in his community.
Because that's what student athletes in South Dakota do. They use the skills they develop playing high school sports today
to do even bigger things in life tomorrow.
High school sports.
A winning part of a complete education.
This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in South Dakota. This is sportsmanship. School sports, it's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
Who do I perform for? I perform for all the awesome composers whose music deserves to be heard.
I perform for all the stagehands who make sure I never miss a cue.
I perform for our high school choir director who taught me to breathe from the diaphragm and sing from the heart.
Speech, debate, theater, music. The performing arts teach valuable life lessons that typically aren't taught in the classroom. They help high school students learn leadership skills that prepare them to enjoy more satisfying, productive lives.
I perform for Mrs. Evans, my high school debate coach, who has helped me become more confident than I ever dreamed possible.
This message presented by South Dakota High School Activities and the high school in your community.
Hey, I've got a question for you. Who will you perform for?
The South Dakota High School Activities Association Board of Directors meeting is currently in recess or executive session. Please stand by for continued live audio coverage.
This may sound like a typical high school basketball game being played on a Friday night in South Dakota. In fact, it's a crash course in cooperation and teamwork. It's a test of dedication, determination, and drive. It's character development in action. If you think high school sports are only about competition, think about this. High school sports can play a critical role in a student's overall education. In fact, studies show that students who participate in school sports are more likely to enjoy greater levels of achievement in their academic lives. At the same time, playing sports helps teach lessons not covered in the classroom. Lessons like tolerance, respect for the rules, and the importance of supporting your community. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association. There's just one place where students are students first, and athletics are played with purpose and perspective. That place is your local high school. High school sports offer more than the joy of competition. Studies show that student athletes in South Dakota are also likely to enjoy greater levels of achievement in other areas of their lives, including academics. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
Everybody knows that high school sports generate suspense, excitement, and drama.
They also generate higher grade point averages, stronger work habits, and greater self-esteem.
Everybody knows that high school sports give us more value for our entertainment dollar.
They also give us leaders committed to strengthening communities right here in South Dakota. The true value of playing sports in school can't be measured in wins and losses or dollars and cents. Studies show that participation in sports, along with other extracurricular activities, is one of the best ways to teach leadership, cooperation, accountability, and other invaluable life skills. Don't just stand on the sidelines. Encourage the young people you know to get in the game. When you do, you'll be helping them get ahead in life. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
The South Dakota High School Activities Association Board of Directors meeting is currently in recess or executive session. Please stand by for continued live audio coverage.
These days, the concept of value matters more than ever. And you'd be hard-pressed to find a better value than high school sports. Extracurricular activities, including sports, make up about 2% of the budget for a typical South Dakota high school. In return, participation in sports promotes citizenship and sportsmanship. Sports also instill a sense of community pride and teach lifelong lessons about cooperation and self-discipline. They encourage physical fitness. They produce community leaders. By offering so many benefits to the community for such a small percentage of a school's overall budget, it's easy to see why high school sports are one of the best bargains around. The real cost would come from not having them at all. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
What do basketball, choir, drama club, and marching band all have in common? They're all high school activities that offer learning opportunities not necessarily found in the classroom. They take up just a fraction of a typical South Dakota high school's budget, and they go a long way to giving young people the tools they need to thrive. High school activities, they're more than extracurricular. They're extra important, too. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
It may not require a textbook, but it's filled with valuable lessons. It may not take place in a classroom, but it's an ideal environment for learning. It may not involve a diploma, but it can help prepare South Dakota's young people for life. It's high school sports. High school sports can play a critical role in a student's overall education. In fact, studies show that students that participate in high school sports are more likely to enjoy greater levels of achievement in their academic lives. If you think high school sports are only about competition, think again. Better yet, think about attending a high school sporting event in your community. You'll be amazed by what you see. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
The South Dakota High School Activities Association Board of Directors meeting is currently in recess or executive session. Please stand by for continued live audio coverage.
Let's talk about the X's and O's of family entertainment. Every parent in South Dakota knows the importance of being able to draw up an activity that'll get you out of the house for a couple of hours. But it needs to be affordable. It needs to be family-friendly. Above all, it needs to be fun. Now, let's talk about high school sports. Bang for your buck, school sports provide the perfect game plan for your family. You'll enjoy all of the drama and excitement competitive sports offer. You'll be supporting the future leaders of our community in a meaningful way. Best of all, you can take the entire family without breaking the bank. Heck, you won't even dent it. Now, enough chalk talk. Let's get out there and see what's playing at the high school in your community. School sports. Good for our kids, good for our community. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
I perform for our high school choir director, who taught me to breathe from the diaphragm and sing from the heart.
Speech, debate, theater, music, the performing arts teach valuable life lessons that typically aren't taught in the classroom. They help high school students learn leadership skills that prepare them to enjoy more satisfying, productive lives.
Hey, I've got a question for you. Who will you perform for?
This message presented by South Dakota High School Activities and the high school in your community. There's just one place where students are students first, and athletics are played with purpose and perspective. There's just one place where a team is more than a group of individual agendas. It's a catalyst for demonstrating the potential of the collaborative spirit. There's just one place where players, coaches, and fans experience the exhilaration that happens when an entire community rallies behind the school team. That place is your local high school. High school sports offer more than the joy of competition. Studies show that student athletes are more likely to enjoy greater levels of achievement in other areas of their lives, including academics. In addition, high school sports help young people in South Dakota develop the discipline and confidence they need to be leaders in life, even as they unite communities like nothing else. High school sports, a winning part of a complete education. This message presented by the South Dakota High School Activities Association and the South Dakota Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
The South Dakota High School Activities Association Board of Directors meeting is currently in recess or executive session. Please stand by for continued live audio coverage.
Who do I play for? I play high school basketball for every baller who ever played a pickup game on a driveway, playground, or alley. Because we...
Okay, it's 10:14, and we are back in session with the August 13th Board of Directors meeting. For those of you following online or Zoom, in our agenda, we are now at item 14, which is the appointment of the Activity Association board members and athletic activity directors to the site selection committee. The appointments are going to be, the committee will look the same as it did in 1920, with Soma, Vasquez, Roeder, Mann, Miley, and Brownell. And the changes will be Craig Cassins replacing Mo Rusing, and then Craig Boyens replacing Marceau. So Boyens of Watertown and Cassins of Faulkton, and the existing ones from last year. Okay, item number 15. Three changes. Go ahead, Dan, the big one here. Yep.
Okay, so things change often with this, and you all know that as you go through your plans at your local schools. But we'll just go through here, and I'll highlight changes that have been made in regards to our plans here in our documents. So as we scroll down, nothing changed to the cover page, nothing changed to our guiding principles or safety, nothing changed in principles 2 or 3. Here's our biggest change, would be principle number 4. Initially, we had a return to play form that was for everyone involved, participants, coaches, non-participants, bus drivers. We're asking them all to get this return to play form completed. In addition, we were using the CDC guidelines for a positive test, returning from a positive test of 10 days since symptom onset, 24 hours asymptomatic. Okay. After we approved that, guidance came out from the American College of Cardiology, and the NFHS released a joint statement for the American Medical Society of Sports Medicine, both recommending for return to activities that it be 14 days since onset of symptoms. The NFHS document recommended 7 days asymptomatic. The American College of Cardiology recommended 14 days asymptomatic before return. So in working with the medical staff on our task force, Dr. Cowles, Dr. Valentine, Trigg, Paul Richter, we made that change, and we kind of tried to split the difference here. So John, if you scroll down to the return to play form. Yeah, it's going to be on like page 20, I think. Okay, we made a few changes to this. Number one, we removed the requirement for coaches and non-participants to get this filled out. They will follow the CDC guidelines of 10 days, 24 hours asymptomatic. They get that letter from the Department of Health. They're good to come back. Okay? For participants, and this goes for fine arts, and it goes for athletics, okay? We're having them get this filled out. I cleaned this up a little bit because there was some confusion regarding the 14 days and the 7 days. So that first bullet point here says 14 days have passed since symptom onset during which the individual has been asymptomatic for at least the last 7 days without the use of fever-reducing medication. That's the change there. It had been 10 days, 24 hours symptom-free, or there was 20 days, 24 hours symptom-free for people who had severe symptoms. So we cleaned that up. Now it's 14 days, 7 days. The last 7 days of that, it's not an additional 7 days. It's the last 7 days of those 14 have to be asymptomatic. There's a checkbox there in terms of hospitalization. There's a cardiac screen that the doctor goes through to look for chest pain, some palpitations, heart murmur. And there's a note there that if any of these cardiac screens are positive, or if they were hospitalized, that those doctors should consider further workup. And Dr. Valentine, Dr. Powell's worked with us on that part. I don't know where our check boxes went here. I got to get those back in there. But then there's a check box here for the doctors. They can check that the individual has satisfied the criteria and that they're cleared to return. There's an optional checkbox there that because of moderate or severe symptoms, because of hospitalization, because of any cardiac issues, the doctor can say you're cleared, but you also have to do this graduated return to play progression before you can fully return. Okay, if you scroll down, that graduated return to play progression is 4 stages, which are 6 days. They return on the 7th. So this is where we're meeting that 14 days asymptomatic that the American College of Cardiology is recommending. Because by the time this is over, they would have had those 7 days asymptomatic plus another 7 days of the graduated return to play. So we're meeting the NFHS and the sports medicine, American Medical Society of Sports Medicine recommendations, and we're giving them an option to assign those extra 6 days playing on the 7th, which meets the American College of Cardiology recommendations. Okay? Or the doctor, if you scroll back up, the doctor can say, no, they haven't met these criteria, they're not returned to play. Okay? So that's the change in there. And the biggest confusion here is going to be that after 10 days of self-isolation, 24 hours with no symptoms, the kids are going to get clearance from the Department of Health to go back to school. And I've got a parent letter drawn up that I'm going to send out to every school that they can give to their parents to explain this and explain why we're deviating from the CDC guidelines. And it's much like what we do with concussions. A student is often able to return to school before they can or should return to athletics or participation in activities. This is no different than that. That form gets you back into school. The Department of Health form gets you back into school. Does not clear you for athletics. And initially, their form letters that they were sending to students said you are cleared to return to activities. We talked with them. They're taking that activities part out and saying you must satisfy requirements of the SDHSAA before returning to activities. So that will clear things up with the parents as well. Okay, so that's the two biggest changes to this, are that we changed from the 10 days, 24 hours to 14 days and 7 days asymptomatic. And we're removing the requirement for coaches and non-participants to get this form. So coaches are good after 10 days. Non-participants are good after 10 days. Any participant has to get this form filled out.
That would include officials, correct?
The officials, no, the officials are good after the 10 days, 24 hours.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
The coaches, the non-participants includes officials as well.
We're worried about the kids with this form. And essentially, what we want is a doctor to look over them and try to catch if there's any cardiac issues, if there's any respiratory issues, if there's any other issues that they had, if they had severe symptoms, if they're still having some other issues because of it, then they need to wait a little bit longer. You know, just like with the concussion, where sometimes you have to wait a little bit longer. You can go back to school, but you can't play sports yet.
And is a non-participant, is that like a student manager?
Yes.
That is? Okay.
Yep. And that extra 4 days, that's not to account for additional spread of the illness or anything like that. It's 100% to give an extra couple days because the medical information that they have says sometimes it takes those extra days for some of these symptoms to become present. So it's those full 14 days to check for these additional issues to make sure that there's no lingering cardiac issues, there's no lingering respiratory issues or anything else. It makes sense? And I do have a parent letter, like I said, explaining, yes, you're going to get a letter from the Department of Health saying after 10 days your kid can go back to school. Okay? We have a little bit extra to check for these things, and I think it also makes it a little bit more simple because in the past, or prior to this, you could return back to sports quicker if you tested positive than if you were a close contact, because a close contact would have that 14-day quarantine. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense. I'm sure it makes sense medically, but for us, it didn't make a whole lot of sense that you could return back quicker if you were positive than if you were near somebody who was positive. So now it's 14 days for whether it's a close contact or whether it's a positive test. It's 14 days to come back to sports. Okay, we scroll back up, John. So we did change that language in here to what we have. We added the thing there that non-participants, that would include, like we said, coaches, officials, student managers, bus drivers, whatever, with a verified positive test, follow CDC guidelines, and they get that DOH clearance before return. Okay. The other change we have, scroll down here, John, would be those final recommendations right here. So we have a couple things that we want to, nope, one more, sorry. Additional considerations. We have those couple things that we wanted to clear up. Okay, the first would be playoff qualification. Because we have some schools who have said we're not doing fall sports, we have some schools who have said we're out for the first quarter. We have some schools where it's dependent upon lockdown orders in there or shelter-in-place orders where they're at. We need to put a date here. Okay? So what we have is in schools who are forced to start the school year with complete distance learning and are not able to participate due to local or county or tribal guidance or orders, we have these deadlines in place to qualify for postseason play. So for our individual sports, the school has to participate in their first contest no later than September 15th. In team sports, they have to participate in the first contest no later than October 15th. Now for football, that's a pretty short turnaround. I believe our first round playoffs for 11B and 9-man are October 22nd. Right now with the schools that are out, the only schools that we have that are not participating right away are both 11A schools. Their first round is October 29th. Okay, and I don't know how that, John, you can maybe talk about football. That might be a completely different animal here because we do the scheduling for that and just because of the nature of the sport.
Yeah, for both A and B, we might have to make some considerations for football. For all of the sports, it's jive and it would fit.
Okay. Okay, and then we're also suspending those minimum contest rules in all sports for 2020. We had provisions in there. I think it's a 5B minimum for football to qualify.
That's what I was referencing by A and B, not 11A and B, but items A and B. I would be wary of a team being able to go 1-0 and making the playoffs.
Yes, what we're more looking at here is if school is playing all year, but they have to stop for a game or two, and then they have to stop, and they end up with 5 games instead of 6 because they've had to start and stop throughout the year. So to suspend those minimum contest rules, a lot of it is going to be situational and decisions that we're going to have to make as an office, depending on the context of it. So in looking at that, and then number 2 there, as you can imagine, we've gotten a lot of questions about out-of-state open enrollments. Yesterday I got them from Connecticut, California, I've gotten them from Washington State, Wisconsin, a lot from Minnesota. So we wanted to clarify our out-of-state open enrollment considerations here. We have, for our adjacent states, it's all dependent upon if our Department of Health and their Department of Health have a tuition agreement with each other. We have those agreements in our adjacent states for North Dakota, Iowa, and Minnesota. So this is just clarifying it. North Dakota, that allows open enrollment. Border school can transfer to any school within the state. Okay, and that goes both ways. I don't know what North Dakota their activities association rules are for those kids coming in, but from our perspective, we have a separate open enrollment form from North Dakota Open Enrollments. We honor that. That's not going to be as big of an issue because they're playing sports up there. Iowa, this was a brand new agreement, or an agreement that was just renewed. The agreement with them is that the 2 districts have to be touching each other, and the person's physical residence has to be closer to the South Dakota school than it is to their concurrent school in Iowa. That doesn't barely ever work or happen. And there's some considerations for what was the Greater Scott and Greater Hoyt district within South Dakota. That doesn't really pertain to us. Minnesota's the biggest one, and this one was kind of messy because there's codified law regarding Minnesota, and there's a tuition agreement with Minnesota, and they don't really match up. Okay, the tuition agreement says January 15th of the prior year, or if both boards agree to it, they can do it. However, this codified law 131521 stipulates that request had to have been made by July 1st. So we're going with the codified law. That's a safe bet for us. We can fall back on the law for it. So with Minnesota, both districts have to be on the border. They don't have to be touching each other, but they have to be on the border. And that request has to have been made prior to July 1st of this year. We have some tuition agreements between districts with Elkton Lake Benton, with, I know up in the Big Stone area, those high school kids that live in the Big Stone City School District, they can go to several different schools because they don't operate a high school. And we've got some cooperative agreements with Esteline, Hendricks, and then up in the corner with Rochelle, South Dakota, Campbell, Tinta, Minnesota, and Fairmont, North Dakota, Tri-State. They're competing as a North Dakota school, with the exception of cross country. Is that right? Yeah. So Minnesota was messy. We're going with the codified law because we can fall back on that, and we feel good about falling back on state law. So that's where we're at with that. Our concern there was kids open enrolling within Minnesota to a Hendricks. Open enrolling to Hendricks and then coming across the border through a tuition agreement. Minnesota does not allow free open enrollment like we do. If you transfer without a corresponding move, it's a 1-year sit-out. So that takes care of that, and it takes care of the same issue occurring, kids moving into the Lake Benton School District and then moving across to Elton. So I think we've got this locked up. And then for Nebraska, Wyoming, Montana, and any non-contiguous states, there's no open enrollment allowed. It has to be a bona fide move or some legitimate hardship issue that is not my school's not offering sports. Okay? At this point, we have not changed our bylaws to include that as a reason for a hardship. Questions on that?
Question for, I guess for John. It could be Joe too, although volleyball maybe is a little different than football because everybody qualifies for the postseason. So with football, was there discussion if you did only get one game in and you won at 1-0? And I am not familiar enough, I guess, with the seed formula.
To a seed, how we seed them.
That's my question with that. Was there any discussion on if you got 1-0 and you made the playoffs, it might be an automatic?
Yeah, my answer is we still need to have a minimum contest rule in football because that very scenario may happen because we don't take everybody into the playoffs. And Joe's similarly in volleyball. We were just chatting here in volleyball. The question is if you don't play the 14 matches, you get seeded 10, you get seeded last in your region. Do we still do that with seeding in volleyball because everybody gets in? Football, I'm a little bit more concerned about because it's realistic by that date timeline there. Somebody could go 1-0, 2-0. That would have been 1-7 or 2-6, and all of a sudden they're in, and somebody else is staying out.
And that would be in 11A and AA and AAA.
It could happen. Even in a 9-man situation.
Well, that's right.
I'll pick on Tom. Tom decides all of a sudden he's not going to play until the last 2 weeks of the year, and they go 2-0. It might have gone 2-6. I don't know what the Avon crew is going to be like this year, so don't take it offensive. But now all of a sudden you get in as an at-large, and maybe you just kick somebody else out of the playoffs because of where you're at. So I'm a little concerned there. I know it's 6 maybe is a little steep because you just figure you have that one shutdown and that might knock you out. I think that's probably it, but I would think at least 4 games probably. Just spitballing a little bit, then you've at least kind of had a season. You don't just get to show up and.
Well, 4 is essentially half your season, right?
So I think that to me is fair in football. I don't see it being an issue in soccer because everybody's going to start playing here. You could have a team that gets left out in soccer as well, but I don't think it's as because of where their season is, and honestly, they'll have lunch food done before they even get into the schoolhouse. I think soccer's okay, but I think the football maybe keeping a 4-game minimum there with the understanding that obviously we can reconvene you guys as a board to make a decision on something hopefully that happens. And then whatever we want to do with the volleyball, if it's a you're in, but you're seated differently, we might have 1 or 2 or 3 teams in the region that falls into that category.
Quite honestly, I think in volleyball we need to keep our minimum contest rule. They're still going to get to play, but they're just going to be seated last. So our rule is 10. So you have to have a minimum of 10 contests to be seeded. If we want to adjust that, I don't know that I'd adjust that much more than that because you could easily go to a tournament on a Saturday and play 4 matches and in one day and have that be, deceitful in your seed points. So I don't know that I want to sway from 10 too much. I might consider 8, but I think it would be a distinct advantage to a team that came in late in the season and went to a tournament here or played in 2 tournaments. Let's say got in there 8 matches, but it was teams that don't reflect on the entire schedule. That makes sense.
It does. I don't know. I guess just my opinion on the 10 versus the 8. I like the 8 better just because of the Saturday tournaments and knowing that that's a big question mark out there. So some schools may not be able to pick up those matches, and they're not going to get, I guess you could say, those extra matches because Saturday tournaments are being canceled.
I'd be willing to adjust that to 8 just because we don't have those tournaments.
So what does that do? My concern right now is schools that are out for the first quarter, right? Through no choice of their own. It's an order within their community. And say their second quarter starts October 12th. They'd be able to play up until the postseason, but if they didn't get those 8 games in, then they're seeded last.
They'll be seeded last. They'll still get to play, so everybody still gets in, but they'll be seeded last in their particular region.
So the opportunity really isn't being taken away for the postseason. It's just where you're going to, unlike John's situation, that could be completely different.
No, but you're going to be matched up against the top seed.
Yeah.
Yeah, this stinks because there's not a really good middle ground.
Well, you're 1 and 8. I mean, generally, your 1's going to get a bye. Your 2's probably going to get a bye. So you're going to be in that 3 to 6, 3 to, mid road of that.
And realistically, in A volleyball, how it plays out, if let's just say you have 2 of them in the same region. We don't have a region that has more than 7 in it. So you're talking about, instead of having, essentially you're going to have 2 tough matches to get to the SODAC instead of potentially 1. It's just the order of who's playing who gets shuffled a little bit. But it's not so advantageous that if you don't do anything, you go to a tournament, you walk through it, and all of a sudden which side of the bracket do you want to be messed up? The top or the bottom is really that there.
You run into those same issues with the bigger class, because if I, as a school district, sit out because we have gone into remote learning, and then we come back into it, I might be the best team in the state and come back in and we have that 1 and in with the SODAC, and you're arguably the 1 or 2 team in the state, and so you play in first round. That could be something that might happen too, but I don't know how you get around some of that stuff.
Mike?
Just out of curiosity, did the athletic directors weigh in on any of this? I'm just curious as to, were they involved in any of that? I'm just thinking about the October 15th date for football. Seems really far down the line. And then where would the forfeits fit into that? If you have a school that has to forfeit a football contest, does that count as a win? If we were to say they play at least 4 games, is that one of their wins then, even though they didn't play the game?
I'd say a forfeit would, yeah.
I'm only asking that because if you have a school that maybe wins 2 games and has 2 forfeit wins, maybe be seated higher than a team that played a tough schedule and maybe lost 2 games. I mean,
Yeah, I'm thinking of it too from the football side. It could very well be that your team is